So probably one of the biggest questions that I get asked from people is about death, about how I dealt with my own brother's death, about how I grew through it and learned from it, and, you know, tips on how to kind of recover from dealing with the death of a loved one. I learned a lot from having dealt with my brother's death. A few things that I know is that life is hard and that death is inevitable, and it's always something that changes you. The first person that ever died in my life that I was very close to was my grandfather, and but you know, there's an expectation there when your grandparents die. It's sad. For me, it was actually, as much as I loved my grandfather, it was actually harder for me to watch my grandmother lose her husband of 50 years. My grandfather's death taught me about love, and watching that love unfold and watching her release him and how she dealt with that. And I remember her telling me one time that, you know, the bed that she shared with her husband for all of those years, she has to go home and sleep in alone. And that's just that got so overwhelming for her. But just watching her through the process, that death taught me about love. My brother's death, on the other hand, taught me about time. My brother's death, it broke me. I don't know any other way to say it other than it broke me. It was, my brother and I were extremely close, and it was very unexpected. And I started out with some guilt from it, because the last time I had talked to my brother and spent any time with him, he came up to my office and wanted to take me to lunch, and I was like, I don't have time for you, I don't have time for this, and I rushed him through lunch. And I remember him leaving me, and he said, "Sis," and just yelled, "Sis," clear across this parking lot. Turn around, and I said, "What?" And he said, "I love you." And I laughed and rolled my eyes and walked inside. And that was the last time I ever talked to my brother. And when my brother died, it's literally all I could think about was that moment. Had I ever known that that was going to be the last time I ever saw him, I wouldn't have rushed through the lunch. I would have walked over to him and hugged him and said, "I love you too." I would have done a million things different. And I had so much guilt over that. And then came the actual feelings of, you know, dealing with his death. It was, I never talked about it. After he died, I didn't talk about it. And I didn't talk about it because there was no chance that there was any words that I could ever find that would describe how I was actually feeling. I couldn't say that I missed him, because that doesn't explain how much I missed him. I couldn't say that I was sad, because that doesn't explain how deeply sad I was. I couldn't say that I was angry. Words could not describe these emotions that I was feeling, so I just didn't talk. For me, I'll tell you the number one thing that somebody said to me that helped me the most is, this guy walks into my office and he said, this older gentleman, actually, he says, "I heard that your brother died. And when I was about 30 years old, my twin brother died. And I want to just tell you something. You're never going to get over it, so don't try to get over it. It's always going to hurt. So stop trying to make it not hurt. Just feel the pain and let it change you how it's supposed to change you. Because death changes those on this side of the grave. It's supposed to change you." And that was like this prolific moment for me of realizing that those people were in your life, your personal, specific life, for a reason. And their death was not an accident in your life. It happened in your life for a reason, and that reason was to help mold you and change you and help you grow and become the human being that you're supposed to be. The truth is that you could not be the person you are ultimately supposed to be without having that happen. So I finally got to a point where I was letting myself, you know, just feel it. I remember about 2 years later, literally 2 years later, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I just started bawling. I remember just laying in bed and just like literally, like uncontrollably just crying. because I had never actually dealt with it, and I needed to. Emotions aren't meant to be suppressed. If you're feeling something, you need to allow yourself to feel it. And I learned that too. So I started letting myself feel. I started letting myself feel the loss and feel the death and feel the pain and feel just all of that. And then I started allowing it to work in my life how it needed to work and how it was supposed to work, because I made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to let my brother's death be in vain in my life in particular. I wanted it to mean something to me. I wanted it to change me in whatever way it was supposed to change me. And it was literally like me just kind of throwing my hands up and saying, what is this supposed to mean to me? What is this supposed to do to me? How is this supposed to change me? Because I'm open. I'm open to letting that unfold. I'm so open to letting that happen in whatever way it's supposed to happen. And when I did that, life happened. Everything changed for me. And I started celebrating the time that I did have with them. I started celebrating the amazing memories, and I started thinking about all of the incredible moments that we had together. And I started just being thankful for his life and not angry at his death, and thankful that of all of the sisters in all of the world, he came to me for a reason. So you have to let it work in your life how it's supposed to work in your life. You have to understand that there are no accidents in the universe, and that you have a very specific purpose in your life, and that you could not be the human being that you are ultimately supposed to be without stars don't shine without darkness. And you couldn't become the person you were ultimately supposed to become. I would not be anywhere near the woman I am today. I mean, like, nowhere near this human being if it were not for that moment that changed me. So allow yourself to feel whatever you need to feel, and understand that you're never going to get over it. There's a level of hurt and pain that will always exist. And what you do is you kind of like assimilate. You learn to eventually just kind of deal with it. And you're always going to be sad, and there will never be words, but there is a purpose in your life, and this is all part of the purpose for you. Ultimately, this is about you, and that is what you need to take away from dealing with the death of a loved one. But there's a purpose beyond this. Don't get stuck on the moment that breaks you. That's how most people become stagnant, is that they get stuck on the break. What breaks you open is never as important as what it breaks open. So, there is a purpose in your life. Let it change you, and eventually grow past it and move on. And whether you realize it or not, if no one else in your life gets you, I'm telling you, I do. I truly do understand.